जय जय श्री राधे। श्री वल्लभाधीश की जय हो। श्री गिरिराज धरन की जय। सब वैष्णवन को जय श्री कृष्ण. Today is the 34th day of our readings of the stories of the 84 Vaishnava disciples of Sri Vallabhacharya Ji. And continuing from yesterday, the story of Purushottam Das, Part 1. One day, Sri Gosaiji travelled to Agra and came to stay at Purushottam Das's home. At that time, Purushottam Das's wife was keeping herself out of sight. When Sri Gosaiji asked where she was, Purushottam Das replied that her sacred thread must have broken, but Sri Gosaiji gleaned therefrom that she was out of Seva for the 5 days of her period. Sri Gosaiji bathed and prepared some dishes, more than 5 vegetables, rice, dal and sweet rice pudding. When it was time to roll the chapatis, Purushottam Das's wife, having bathed, sat down to participate. Sri Gosaiji asked her where she had been up till then. She replied that she had been busy with something. Bhav Prakash, the inner meaning. It was the 5th day of her period, and so she kept out of the way because she had not yet bathed, and she wanted to be totally clean when she went to see Sri Gosaiji. Part 1 continued. When the rotis were ready, Sri Gosaiji offered everything to Sri Thakurji. When the time was right, they accepted the prasad and let Sri Thakurji rest. Purushottam Das invited Sri Gosaiji to eat out of Sri Thakurji's plates and bowls. He objected. "How can I do that?" he said. "I will eat from a leaf plate." Purushottam said, "We have some wealth and there are still pot makers. We will bring new vessels for Sri Thakurji, so please eat out of these." And Sri Gosaiji did just that. Bhav Prakash. The couple had a deep connection with Sri Gosaiji. In the Leela, Sri Chandravali Ji used to eat together with Sri Thakurji in the same plate. These two were the Sakhis of Sri Chandravali Ji and understood all the pastimes. That is why they asked Sri Gosaiji to eat out of Sri Thakurji's plate. They both loved Sri Gosaiji a lot, and so they reasoned that if they put the prasad into another vessel, it might lose some of its taste and become too cold. They did not want to have to heat it up because it would have meant his waiting, which was unacceptable to them, so they made him eat out of those very vessels because of their loving connection to him. Part 1 continued. Sri Gosaiji sat down to eat. The wife sat next to him and asked him to take a particular dish. "I will eat what I want to," he said. Purushottam's wife, Das's wife, then requested him to partake in the same way as he did when in Sri Nandaraji's home, and that he should always do this when taking prasad from Vaishnavas. Bhav Prakash. When in Sri Nandaraji's home, in the Leela, he would have to eat exactly what the devotee wished him to. There he was insisting on eating what he felt like, so that would not work. Part 1 continued. In this way they enjoyed affectionate exchanges with Sri Gosaiji. They fed him many lovely preparations, and he was much pleased. They made him sleep on Sri Thakurji's bedding. They massaged his feet. He told them to stop and to go and take prasad themselves, but the couple interjected, "We can always have prasad, but when will we be able to enjoy so much with you?" They were stubborn in their insistence on serving him to their heart's content, and did so for a whole 7 days. Every day they offered new vessels and delightful bedding and wearing apparel. Thus the couple were great devotees and the recipients of much grace. Bhav Prakash. The couple loved their Guru as much as, or even more than their Sri Thakurji. They received the fruit of all their directly offered services of so many kinds. Thus concludes Varta 22, the story of Sri Purushottam Das and his wife, who lived on Rajghat in Agra, although there is truly no end to their story. Varta 23, the story of Tripura Das, an artisan from Sergar. Bhav Prakash. In the eternal Leela, he is Sri Thakurji's close Sakhi named Harini, who is his messenger carrier, and she has large, lovely eyes, like a deer, hence her name. He was born in Sergar in the house of an artisan. His father used to work for the king of that region and had an important status. When Tripura Das turned 12 years old, his father began to take him to work with him, and this way he learnt all the skills. One day Tripuradas and his father travelled with their king to Agra on his visit to the local ruler. The king stayed there a few days and then went back home. As he went on his journey, they passed through Govardhan town, and the king went up to see Srinathji, the upholder of the Sri Giriraj mountain. He took Tripuradas and his father with him. Tripuradas developed a strong attachment for Srinathji's form. They stayed there for 3 days in Govardhan. On the 4th, it was time for them to proceed, but Tripuradas came down with a fever due to his impending separation from Srinathji. He became crazy. His father asked what was wrong, and he replied that he would rather die than leave that place. He told his father to either stay there for some time or go with the king, and he would catch up later after seeing the Lord for a prolonged time. Only then will I return alive, he said. Tripuradas's father told the king all about it, and the king told him to place a man and a horse with the boy so that he could come home afterwards. His father told Tripuradas not to worry and that he could stay there. Tripuradas was overjoyed. His fever went down. His father told him to follow quickly, for he was getting old. The king needed him as a servant. Tripuradas reassured him that he would come soon. The king and his father then left. On the way, there ensued a quarrel with one landlord, and Tripuradas's father was shot and died. The king killed the landlord and proceeded. Then the king sent a man to find Tripuradas, who told him what had come to pass. Tripuradas was happy to hear the news because it meant he was no longer tied down. Now I will always have the sight of Srinathji. He had his father's last rite performed on the Manasi Ganga lake in Govardhan and let himself also be purified with time. After that, he went to see Srinathji at every period of every day. One day, Sri Acharyaji asked him who he was. He said he should go home now that he had been there continuously visiting Srinathji for 2 months. Tripuradas asked him, "Oh Maharaj, where should I go? My parents are no longer and I am not married. Apart from that, my mind is attached to Srinathji's form. Where else is there to go?" Hearing this, Sri Acharyaji, recognizing his deep love and attachment for the Lord, told him that wherever he was, he would always have the direct sight of his beloved Lord without a single second separation. Tripuradas then bowed low to him and requested, "This is exactly what I need, because I cannot live without Srinathji, but I must earn my keep, because I cannot beg. I was worried about this, but you have blessed me with this grace, and this is what I shall do." Sri Acharyaji told Tripuradas to bathe, and then he initiated him with the Lord's name and Brahma Sambandh. He gave him some of the foot nectar, Charanamrit, from Srinathji's feet. The feet are washed with various substances added to the water like sandal paste and saffron, etc. It is then dried and can be used for tilak or a regular purificatory pinch of dust after bathing, etc. From that moment, Srinathji's form stayed before his eyes all the time. Sri Acharyaji told him to now go. Wherever you are, you will always have this same vision. Never turn your back on the Lord. Tripuradas took his leave and left from there. He decided never to even drink water without first taking the foot nectar of Srinathji. Part 1. Tripuradas was very careful about everything to do with Srinathji, and he made sure that he never turned his back on him. Without first taking Srinathji's foot nectar prasad, he would not even sip water. Tripuradas was employed by a Turk. On his behalf, he had to travel to another district. There he was able to earn a lot of money. He offered everything that he obtained to Srinathji, whether it was grain, vegetables, fruit and flowers, or cloth. Only after offering would he take anything to his own use. Whether he was sitting, standing, or walking, Tripuradas never turned his back on Srinathji. The essential meaning of turning one's back on Srinathji is to never forget him. Tripuradas thought of him, whatever he was doing. Part 1 continued. Every year, Tripuradas would send Srinathji a new, warm, padded quilt. Sri Gosaiji would always wrap Srinathji up in it as soon as he saw it. One day, Tripuradas's Turkish boss wrote up his accounts and demanded money from Tripuradas. Tripuradas said he would only be able to repay that amount of tax after he had earned it. The Turk overturned his house, stole everything and put him in jail. That night 4 beings came into the Turk's bedroom and threw him off the bed, then began to beat him with maces. "Why are you beating me?" he cried out. "What have I ever done to you?" The 4 beings were messengers of Vishnu, and they demanded to know why he had put Tripuradas in jail. "Now we will pulverize you." The Turk begged, rubbed his nose into the ground and promised to release Tripura Das immediately. The messengers of Vishnu left and the Turk went to jail to release Tripura Das. The latter said that it was the middle of the night and so he would leave in the morning, but the Turk objected, saying, "Do you want me to be killed? Go now." Tripura Das returned home. The person who collected donations for Srinathji came to Tripura Das shortly after this. He gave some Mahaprasad to Tripura Das, who thought, "I give Srinathji a lovely warm winter quilt every year, but this year I have nothing to send." He remembered that he had an inkwell with a silver rim, so he sold it and bought a roll of colourful cloth which he gave to the man. Tripura Das asked him not to tell Sri Gosaiji that this had come from him, but to just put it in Srinathji's store. "What to do," he said. "I am not in a good position right now." The collector took the cloth and put it in Srinathji's store. On the day of Sri Prabodhini Ekadashi, Sri Gosaiji wrapped up Srinathji in a different quilt. Srinathji told him that he still felt quite cold and that he'd wanted another warm quilt. Even then he did not feel warm. Sri Gosaiji made a stove of hot coals and gave Srinathji a warm vest and a quilt, but he still felt cold. Sri Gosaiji then realized that he had not used the quilt sent by Tripura Das. He called the man in charge of the store and asked who had sent the quilts this year. The storeman read out the Vaishnavas' names. Sri Gosaiji asked him what had happened to Tripura Das's yearly regular donation. The storeman replied that this year Tripura Das was strapped for cash, and so he had not sent the usual quilt, but that he had sent some cloth instead. "It is dusty and creased up in the store," he said. Sri Gosaiji asked the store manager to get that cloth out and take it to the tailor to quickly clean it up and then make it into a quilt. When Sri Gosaiji wrapped that quilt around Srinathji, he said that he now felt warm and comfortable. Srinathji insisted on using that same quilt on many, many occasions, showing how dependent he is on the love of his special devotees. Tripura Das found out about all of this and broke down in tears. In this condition, he wrote a poem. "My beloved colourful player said, 'I am feeling very cold. You have wrapped me up in so many cloths, but I am still suffering the cold.' Hearing this, Sri Gosaiji lit a golden stove, but then he called for the right quilt, and only then Srinathji smiled as he wore it. This is how kind the Lord is. He is an ocean of compassion. It is so lovely to be remembered by him." The poet Tripura Das now states, "The behaviour of Srinathji, the upholder of the Sri Giriraj mountain, is hard to fathom, and no one can truly explain it." Bhav Prakash. The mood here is that Srinathji accepts those offerings from those who truly love him. It is nothing to do with the thing itself, but only with the love of the heart with which it is given. Shri Giriraj Dharan ki jai, Shiva Labadish ki jai, Sabko Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Jai Shri Radhe. So the reading for today we complete here, and tomorrow we will continue with the rest of the Vartaji of Tripura Das. Jai Ho Ji Aaj Ke Anand Ki Jai.